So tonight's topic was engendered by a discussion I had one of my first meetings at the Science and Art. One of our members was interested in medical device development and said, "Oh, you should do something in medical device development." And there's a lot more that goes into medical device development.
Could you? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then I will move this closer.
No, just.
Okay. We can do it that way. So. So let's go back to the genesis of a project, and you can see that there is hopefully a touch of creativity involved and a lot of hubris. And the hubris I present to you tonight is that at the end of this talk, you will actually want to die of cancer. So it's a high bar I set for myself, but let's begin. When I was in my mid-30s, I developed a hernia. And it grew and grew and grew over the course of years, and became stretched to the point where it grew into my scrotum. And at that point, the pain of that hernia was so great, I had to go and seek surgical redress. Now, when I got to my surgeon, no question, surgery was necessary. He talked about pre-op and post-op and everything, but one subject that didn't come up was he didn't talk about the benefit of harvesting my testicles whilst he was right there inside my scrotum. Now, he also didn't give me a pamphlet.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Hey, living without, yeah, okay, you can read it. I'm trying to keep this on a slight note.
No, not here.
Right. So when I woke up from the surgery, I found out that he had not removed my testicles, and he didn't. It wouldn't have been uncommon. So that he could get a better night's sleep. So on we go. So the truth is, or the fact is, that when you're at that age, at my age, that is somebody from 35 to 40, the most likely a male, the most likely cancer they will get is testicular cancer. So it is a major cancer of concern for that age group, for that cohort. So the question is, why would they not consider it prudent to take out my testicles and therefore remove any chance of testicular cancer? And the reason is because there are serious midlife sequelae of, it's called the gonadectomy, for operative sexual organ excision. And I think we know from various things, there are physical changes, thickening of cartilage, adipose tissue is fat. You can think of the emasculati from the 16th century, 17th century. Weight gain. There's cognitive decline as well. There's a decline in IQ points. There's an advance, a 5-year advance on Parkinson's disease. And there's also hormonal and sexual health, loss of libido, pain in sex, breast tenderness, skin, hair, nails. Your keratin tissue is reduced. Muscle and joint issues. Osteoporosis is very, the onset is incredibly rapid. Digestive, oral health, gum disease, tooth decay, sleep and urinary consequences. And there's mental and social, there's loss of socialization skills. Clinical depression, divorce increases by 50% and dramatically increased suicide rate. And then cancer is also ironically increased the odds of cancer. Cancer is due to glaucoma, cataracts, liver and kidney damage, 52% higher rate of type 2 diabetes, an incidence of chronic kidney disease, which is a major unmet need in medicine. And then autoimmune diseases, liver disease, lupus, Graves, scleroderma are all increased. And then the most important one is that stroke and heart attack is actually reduced a lifespan by 2 years. For a 40-year-old to have a gonadectomy, they will be saying goodbye to 2 years of their lifespan. It's such a dramatic procedure. So does anybody here care to make a guess, in the 54 years since the one cancer was declared, how many men have undergone elective bilateral orchiectomy, it's called for male, gonadectomy, simply because they were undergoing an unrelated proximal abdominal procedure? Does anybody have a guess? How many? Very small, right? I think Catherine's, maybe her fingers were touching, because the answer is 0. I have not been able to find a case of it, and I did the typical search. But for those of you who have a sense of epidemiology, and history, you realize that almost all those sequelae that I was describing really didn't exist medically in the 17th century. So we're not taking our data from the masculati of fame and fortune. So let's reverse that question. Does anyone want to guess how many women have undergone a gonadectomy simply because they were undergoing an unrelated proximal abdominal procedure?
What is an oophorectomy?
Oophorectomy is the female, it's the removal of your ovaries. So orchiectomy is removal of testicles, oophorectomy is removal of your ovaries. Pardon me for not making that clear. Any guesses in the 50 years? Are you ready for some numbers here? Okay, guys, here we go. Well, the number's 1,000. But it's not 1,000 in the past 50, 40 years. It's not 1,000 a year. It's not 1,000 a month. It's not 1,000 a week. Every single day in America for the past 50 years, 1,000 women have had an oophorectomy for no reason, a bilateral oophorectomy. And they call it elective, but as you can see, were they fully informed? Did women who underwent that procedure, were they fully informed? Were their doctors meeting the requirements of their oath? So obviously 250,000, 350,000 women, 15 million since 1971. There's 700,000 hysterectomies in the United States every year. Only 9% are for cancer. I would not consider again, you should be fully informed, but to say that we removed your ovaries because you had endometrial cancer or vulvar cancer or something like that, I would not consider that totally unrelated. I still think the patient should be fully informed as to what those causes would be. In recent years, the trend has stabilized. It grew dramatically until the height of this practice, probably around 1990 to 2000. So the 4 pillars of the Hippocratic Oath: do good, do nothing, do no harm, and the fully informed patient with autonomy. And there's justice too. I think you could sense there's an imbalance there of organ harvesting between men and women. And if you do the math, and this is the root descriptor of the thing, we're talking about quality of life years. So a quality of life year is an appropriate year of fully healthy life for you at that time in your life. It's not like everybody's 7 years old and life is wonderful and they get to skip through the rose garden. No, if you're 80 years old, 85, and your grandkids come over and you want to stand up and hug them and swing them and make coffee and chocolate chip cookies, that's a quality life year. And as you can see, a typical diagnosis of someone who does die from ovarian cancer, they're diagnosed at 65. And the course these are averages. So it's a disease of the it's not a disease, a young person's disease, and they're dead by 72. So it's a 7-year process. Now at that age, a 65-year-old woman should live to be 82. So the numbers are pretty round. They've lost 10 years of life. So you just do the math, 15,000 deaths a year times 10 years. So ovarian cancer in America every year costs Americans 150,000 quality of life years. But if you look at elective bilateral oophorectomy, which is done only because their doctors were terrified of a succeeding case of ovarian cancer, it's somewhere around 3 times the damage. So just stopping this practice would do dramatically more to improve the health of Americans than a total cure for ovarian cancer. This is not new information. Doctors have been told by the AMA, various professional organizations. This is a study that was released back in 2005 that all the authors thought would dramatically change the practice of harvesting organs for no reason. But the practice has barely slowed down. And ironically, women are now the majority gynecologists. So the sense of altering the standard of care is very, very difficult in the medical world. You learn something in medical school, you practice that something. See one, do one, teach one, classic refrain. And on we go. So the AMA and ACOG have urged gynecologists to stop doing this procedure. And the question is why? Why has the profession resisted? Why do gynecologists not listen to their professional organizations. Well, this is a classic practice of what's known as defensive medicine. Defensive medicine is medicine at its rawest. It's medicine practiced to avoid lawsuits. So you go in with a headache, and any old-fashioned doctor would give you an aspirin or a placebo or whatever, but now they can put you through thousands of dollars of testing because they can bill for it and they can avoid future lawsuits. So malpractice insurance companies issue guidelines, and they prefer to see EBOs performed in hysterectomy because they are concerned with succeeding cases. And there are lawsuits. A woman, she had twins. She developed placenta accreta, so they had to go in and remove her uterus. The doctor did not take her ovaries. She did develop ovarian cancer, and that was a $20 million lawsuit. Now, if you look at the numbers, $20 million versus, anyway. And they do, if they complete the EBO during the course of a hysterectomy, they do get to bill more. Not saying that that's their primary cause, but you can see the incentives are misaligned for doctors to change their medical practices. Oh, and most importantly, oncophobia, because it's very easy to tell a patient, hey, if I remove this, if I do this, your chances of that having succeeding cancer are virtually zero. And that is the root cause of what I call oncophobia. So at the height of EBO in 2002, I'll whip through these because I know we're going to be quick. Now that you know the answer, I can just tell you that there is lots of the New York Times baseline characteristics. This study is talking about moderate to zero depression, like the depression rates leading to suicide, misdiagnoses, women with a unique risk. I mean, there's a lot.
Slow down.
Well, I need to go fast. I'm just showing that there is data here, and I can get it to you if you want it. I have not scientifically annotated this talk. But why is ovarian cancer so scary? And the reason is because ovarian cancer is occult. It's one of those cancers that is virtually only identified, at least historically, in the advanced stages. Anytime you hear a cancer has advanced to a high state before it's diagnosed, you know that it is a painless progression. So this pre-cancer, stage 1, stage 2, which are all the localized versions of cancer eruption, were occult. There was no sign of it. Survival rate today versus this is 2015 data, so it was a chart. It is better than that. It is improving. But what I want you to get a sense of is how dramatic the difference is diagnosed at stage 1 or stage 2 versus the latter stages. Your odds of survival 8 times worse. The quality of life is going to be much worse too. And we're not really talking about quality of life here. It brings in too many factors, but just looking at the years of life lost. Stats on ovarian cancer, 21,000 diagnoses, 14,200 deaths. Silent killer, and then only 69% of diagnoses, 69% and more if you look at the unintentional there. So most early diagnoses is made totally by luck. The doctor is in there for some other reason. They notice a large and growing neoplasm on the ovary. They get it analyzed, and that's like, whoa, we caught it localized. Stage 1, 90% chance to survive. Those are breaths of fresh air, but mostly women notice some dramatic symptoms, but it's already too late for that early stage. You're going to go through an ordeal that there's no guarantee you shall survive. Stage of the diagnosis. And then there actually is a lot of radio talk about know the early stages, know the early symptoms of ovarian cancer. And you can see some of them listed here. There's back pain, there's abdominal pain, shortness of breath means it's already grown into your diaphragm. Bloating is all of these are metastatic formations. The pain you're experiencing is because it has migrated from the ovary to another tissue in your body, usually the colon, the omentum, and that's where all these symptoms come from. And sure, you want to recognize these symptoms as soon as possible, but it's really too late for the best possible outcome. But that doesn't mean you ignore these symptoms. But know that if you have ovarian cancer and you're experiencing the symptoms, it has already metastasized and you're in a lot of trouble. And there's other reasons too. There's no blood test for it. There was a biomarker identified about 40 years ago called CA-125. People were very excited about it. It is elevated in ovarian cancer, but you need to have baselines for everybody, and the elevation can modulate. Actually, events happen within the ovary itself that can or cannot release CA-125. They have tried so hard to make it an effective biomarker, and it is not. And the last quote here, I don't know if you can read it. It's just a poor diagnostic. Its sensitivity is terrible. And then, boom. Scanning the ovary. You go in for your typical gynecologic exam, and does anybody even see an ovary in here? And radiologists, I have so much respect for them. I can never identify what they're looking at. So this is a scan not of cancer, but actually of torsion. So ovarian torsion is itself a life-threatening indication. The woman presents in pain. It's not cancer pain. It is ovarian torsion pain. And if it's not seen to, it can necrotize and kill her. So this is a very important scene, and for radiologists to snap his fingers and go, oh, no problem, you've got ovarian torsion, see in surgery tomorrow. That's pretty great. I'm not trying to kill the whole profession here. I highlighted this because, this is a very recent discussion for the American Association for Cancer Research. And you can see the frustration. We're 50 years into the war on cancer. You have not moved the needle. We're still losing just as many women today as we did 50 years ago. Of course, our population has increased, so the survival odds have improved, but it is a frustrating course. Doctors sort of lose weight, boom, ovarian cancer. I don't know what happened to that patient. I hope she survived. So there are monetary and social costs to this too. A quality of life year when a pharmaceutical company is trying to justify their pricing to the FDA or any source, CMS, which is the big insurer for federal purposes, Medicare, Medicaid, Indian Health, that's all under CMS. They basically base it on $100,000 per quality year. So if they can claim, we save 5 years of the patient's lives, they can charge $500,000 for it. That's where we get those enormous figures from. There are costs for genetic gene therapies that are extensive, but charging $3 million for particular gene therapy, they're really basing on quality of life years. But of course, the lost productivity is higher. And the pharmaceutical costs, if you think of all of those sequelae, treating your depression, treating the osteoporosis part, if you suffer, it's called operative menopause. There is a vast difference in operative menopause versus natural menopause. Natural menopause is stages, premenopause, full menopause, even postmenopause. The ovary has positive biologic benefits well past the age of menopause, 65, 70. If you're not indicated, if there's no family history, you should hang on to your ovaries. And also what happens with premenopause and the slow buildup is that your adipose tissue can be stimulated by your pituitary to produce the hormones your body is now missing because your ovaries have stopped producing. It's a great process. When you have operative, within 6 months of an elective bilateral oophorectomy, the patient will have lost half of her bone mass. It is a rapid onset. And there's other things too, a brain fog that never lifts. All those symptoms are bell curves. And so you look at the middle and say, okay, this is when it happens and that's when it happens. But there's always the extremes. People who suffer permanent, long-term damage from operative menopause. So medicine's war on women. I won't go into this. So how does EBO compare? Because I'm identifying EBO, remember, as elective bilateral oophorectomy. So how does it compare to the most notorious procedures in medical history? So let me introduce the Batty's procedure. So Batty was a doctor. He did all the right things. He discussed with his colleagues. He had a patient that was completely out of her mind, crazy and hysterical. And he thought that by removing her ovaries, he might cure that condition. And it was done under scientific supervision, and it was for his time, and this is an abdominal procedure in the 1870s. I mean, that's nuts. We didn't even do cesarean back then. It was deemed a success, and he wrote a paper, and it was published around the world, and many of his colleagues internationally did Batty's procedure. After about 25 years, they realized, whoa, this isn't working. We're harming our patients. And just on the side, we're not harming our patients because of all the sequelae I was just describing. We're harming our patients because a woman who has had her ovaries removed can't have children. So again, like the value of women was to have children. I don't want to downplay that, but more is happening. I think you recognize that. So that's Batty's procedure. Only about 25,000 women. It's hard to describe how many years of life lost, but using the same number that we did with elective bilateral oophorectomy, just to say, okay, so you advanced their death by 2 years. Like they're going to die 2 years sooner. So that's about 50,000 quality of life years lost from Batty's procedure, the entire history of the procedure. Now, of course, probably the one you thought of immediately, lobotomy. So the two men on the left are Freeman and Watts, and I hate to say Watts went to Penn Med, my alma mater. Penn is mine, Penn Med's his. In the entire history of lobotomy, it's about a 20-year history. I just want to say Freeman on the left, he's the nut. He's the guy that went around jamming ice picks into people's eye sockets, erasing every memory they've ever had, and being treated like a superstar. The gentleman on the right is Vegas Moniz. He won the Nobel Prize notoriously for the lobotomy. I tend to have a little bit of sympathy for the guy. He thought he was, whatever. No, forget it. They're all there. So charlatans, however you want to do it. Yeah, it wasn't a good procedure. So in those 50,000 people were lobotomized in the entire history of the procedure. Women, 2 to 1, of course. And if you ascribe, there was benefit. There were people who benefited from it. But anyway, so I have randomly come up with the number 500,000 qualities. You can even make it 1 million. It's a terrible procedure. Back to Vegas Moniz. He's the one of 4 people that have ever won a Nobel Prize for a medical device. I'm a medical device developer, so our team isn't doing that well, especially when he's one of them. What they did not award a Nobel Prize to is Dr. Kurt Sem, who is one of my absolute heroes. He literally invented minimally invasive surgery. It's $1 trillion industry. If you don't use minimally invasive technologies when they are available to you, you are abusing your patient. You are violating your Hippocratic Oath. One man is responsible for a huge portion of that. And he was sent to an insane asylum because his colleagues thought he was nuts. So just to show you how it works. So how does EBO compare? We saw that earlier we'd identified 25 million quality of life years lost to elective bilateral oophorectomy versus 500,000 for the lobotomy and 50,000 for Batty's procedure. So it is my contention it's the most damaging medical procedure since the 1867 invention of sterile technique, with the possible exception of radical mastectomy. You may or may not know this radical mastectomy. I'm not going to show any pictures of radical mastectomy. It is hideous and horror striking. But it comes from a basic misperception of how cancer spreads. So the thought was that cancer spreads like I just showed Paris here. Cancer spreads with a dot, and then as you can see, a little while later it's a bigger dot, a while later it's a bigger dot, and then a little while later it's a bigger dot. So that's that process. So the thought of radical hysterectomy was if a woman had breast cancer, then you cut off the breast. But don't stop there, because women were still dying. So then they'd cut off the pectoral muscles. Then they'd literally remove ribs. They'd remove muscles down the shoulders. They'd remove all the lymph glands in this area, of course. Just massive damage. These women could barely move. They certainly could never use whichever arm the procedure was on. And sometimes it radicalized to both sides. Hey, it may not just be the left. I hope I'm not being too graphic. So in truth, cancer metastasizes like the Vikings. And this is the image we're going to go with. But I just want to show you how incredibly widespread the Vikings were. And the reason why they spread like that, if you notice, they're not penetrating the interior, which is the thought of cancer. I don't know if you can see it, but cancer uses the lymph system and the circulatory system to penetrate all over the body. That's why metastatic organ, you can have brain cancers, bone cancers, lung cancers. They're metastasizing through the circulatory process in our body, and that's what escaped. The scientists back in those days. Scientists, were they scientists? Here we go. So the man who is responsible for the radical mastectomy is one of the great names. William Halsted. You can't go to a medical school anywhere in America and not see his name somewhere. And he put the law down. It's like Aristotle saying, yes, there are, ether and blah, blah, blah. And that's how the world works. Nobody questioned it. And I know you've probably already read this. And I do want to show Bernie Fisher. He's also one of my heroes. He was the hero of, what was the book? Did I read it in there? The Emperor of All Maladies, which was a series that was also made into a TV presentation. But he virtually single-handedly ended it. And how did he end it? He ended it by tracking. That's all he did. So it's, how do women do who have this amazingly invasive procedure versus women who don't with the exact same diagnosis and spread? It's just data. It's not like you need an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, Ptolemy was tracking the stars 2,000 years ago. You just had to doubt that Halstead knew what he was talking about and track it. And in 1958 was his first published paper. By 1971, you can see the quote here, it just radically, like, people realized that they were doing horrible, horrible damage to their patients. But even though the quote implies that by 1971 this procedure was done, I think you know by now that that's not the case. The last radical mastectomy was actually done in the year 2000. So it took 30 years for the medical profession to completely change its tune. So what can be done? How do we get doctors to stop killing their patients? Well, unlike pharmaceuticals, around a medical device guy, if a doctor uses the medical device when deployed in strict adherence to its labeling, that means the indication for which it is created, instructions for use, perfect execution of the medical device, he is obviated. There is no legal liability on him anymore. And really that's the root cause of what this practice is. This is how you stop defensive medicine by creating devices. So let me just talk a little bit about ovarian cancer. What makes it so different? Sure, it's painless. We know that. Painless progression. But of all the major cancers, it is the only one that grows like Olmsted thought it did. It metastasizes proximally. It does not metastasize through the blood or the lymph until much later stages. And proximally means the cancers form, the metastatic transmission is from the surface of the epithelial cancer to its surrounding area. So I mentioned the omentum before. That's this fatty, lubricating region. They're all blood-soaked fallopian tubes. Everything here is a typical, and yeah, the colon. The colon's a classic site. So it spreads proximally. The ovary grows many times its normal size and then begins to emanate metastatic progression. So can anybody think of perhaps an intervention with just that knowledge, common knowledge, that might be beneficial? Anybody? Okay, well, I will then present to you a cancer cloche, or to put it more popularly, a cancer condom. If you can wrap the ovary, you would stop metastatic progression in the earliest stages, just plain and simple. So a cancer that was very advanced and aggressively metastasizing from its surface, those metastatic projections would have nowhere to go. They'd be constrained. So there you go. Is that alone enough to get doctors to change what they're doing? I actually thought it wasn't. How do we improve on this device? So the next step, as you can see, and how would this be initiated? Well, I'll just go from here. I was offered a pointer and I turned it down, but if you can see, so the uterine ligature, you scrape away the broad ligament is what holds all this in place. Scrape that away. The ligature that holds the ovary to the uterus is not vasculated. It is there just for strength. It's the suspensory ligament that is unrelated to the uterus. It provides all the blood for the ovaries. That's why you can allow an ovary to remain. You do not have to remove it during the course of the surgery. It adds time to the surgery and you don't get the bill for it, but there you go. So in my own company history, I mean, here you can see the cervix too. So interviewing doctors is a big part of what I do, or the profession. I don't do it enough, and I should do it more. But so we were studying a way to close the uterus after C-section. It's the largest medical procedure in the world. There are sequelae, damaging sequelae for infection. There's a golden rule of C-section: once a C, always a C. We had animal data that showed that we could effect perfect closure, scar-free healing, so that uterus was perfectly capable of a trial of labor in a succeeding pregnancy. The FDA, in a pre-sub, told us that they would virtually never approve that unless we had a massively expensive and wild. They wanted a 5-year follow-on fertility trial. And if it works in an animal, it's going to work in a human. That's what mechanical processes are all about. But so that was it. We couldn't do it, and we talked to all the KOLs, the leading lights of their profession in gynecology. Gee, are there any other things you do that are really, really tough? And they said, well, closing the cuff is so difficult. Like I can't use minimally invasive technique on closing the cuff. I need to convert the patient to open or go in vaginally to try to close the cuff. So when you cut, so if you're doing a hysterectomy, you have a choice. You can just cut above the cervix and remove only the uterus, but of course you leave the chance for cervical cancer. Well, doctors, 85% of hysterectomies are called total hysterectomies, and they do involve removal of the cervix. And the doctors we were talking with were like, well, why would any woman want the cervix to remain when there's the fear of a potential case of cervical cancer? And I'll ask you, there are many reasons why you want to retain the cervix. You want to retain the biology of your own body, at least fully inform the patient, but it's routinely performed, and they're terrible at it. And all the bad events from total hysterectomies most of them happen because of poor closure. I don't even want to go into it. The organs can spill out of the vagina. You'd have dehiscence. You'd have infection. If they left the cervix, it would be a much cleaner. At least ask the woman if she's comfortable getting a pap smear every year, because it's a very effective procedure. But anyway, on we go. So the cancer condom. I didn't think the closure was sufficient to change the standard of care. So then we thought about adding fiducial markers. So fiducial markers are little pebbles, pegs that would show up on scanning technology, so you'd know exactly what the morphology means, the shape of the ovaries. By the way, the ovary is only about that big. It's a third the size of a testicle. It is not big. So if you could have a fiducial marker, so a doctor in a doctor's office could see with his scanning technology exactly what the shape of the ovary is, because the first sign of ovarian cancer, it's even called precancer, is the growth of the ovary itself. And that would become evident with this. So that means once a year, a woman would present herself in the doctor's office, and they would have an ability to make a diagnosis, or at least to show concern and explore it further, which they wouldn't with just a condom. There'd still be no indication, even if it was starting to grow. But again, could we get further than that? Was there something else? I call it the uricum. I'm embarrassed by this one. But my father was a gynecologist, OBGYN, and we would call him a gynecologic oncologist today. He was like the cancer specialist in his group. And famously, one of the great friends of the family was Kathy Robert. She was a ballerina, and Dad did all the gynecology for the Pennsylvania Ballet, the Philadelphia Ballet. And one of his patients, he explored, so I'm riding in the car with my daughter, and I'm telling her, because my father was at the end of his life, and Kathy had come back after 40 or 50 years to take care of my father. It was really sweet. My mother had passed away about 10 years earlier, and Kathy was an absolute angel to my father. And so the subject of, wow, how did Dad make this diagnosis? And one of the last conversations we ever had, he told me he digitally explored her because he was able to manipulate her ovary and press it against the sidewall in such a way he could feel a solid growth. The odds of that happening are so small. And we're talking about the early 1960s. And it really, she always said it was a miracle. And when Dad told me how he did it, it's like, wow, that's a miracle. So I asked my daughter, isn't that amazing? What do you think? And she said, I think that would hurt. And there you go. Ouch. Ouch. Okay, so why is that a big revelation? Oh, I guess I'll just talk you through it. So the fact of the matter is, testicles expand painlessly. People with advanced testicular cancer present to their doctor with a testicle the size of a baseball, and they go, is there anything wrong with that? So the ovary's the exact same way. The ovary and the testicles are very, very similar. They expand painlessly. But as every guy knows, and I think culturally every gal knows too, testicles compress in agony. And so the fact is, this cloche with its fiducial markers, it wouldn't just stop metastatic progression. It wouldn't just allow a doctor to make a diagnosis once a year. It would be a constant 24/7 diagnostic for ovarian cancer, because when that ovary grows, it is going to be restrained, it is going to be compressed, and it is going to hurt. So there is a medical device. You've really got something that can change the standard of care. You can convince doctors not to harm their patients. And here are the steps of making a medical device. So now I'm starting the talk that I was requested. So define the mission. So here's fine. You need to do a lot. You need to do more than this too. But is this too small to read? It's too small for me to read. Maybe I can do it quickly. Biomaterials company focused on the early detection, metastatic containment of ovarian cancer. Ovarian cancer is the most lethal female reproductive cancer and the most intractable, killing as many women today as at the dawn of the war on cancer. Due to its inscrutable progression, diagnosis is typically made at post-metastatic stages with a less than 40% 5-year survival rate. By impeding metastatic migration, accelerating clinical presentation, Ovidex will enable early diagnosis, where greater than 90% of patients can expect to be fully cured. Ovidex will give the 250,000 U.S. women who choose elective oophorectomy in America each year a better option to enjoy a normal, healthy life. So that's the mission statement. On we go. We need to confirm and secure our foundational IP. Whew, that's a tough problem. So we did. We prepared it. Oh, good. I have the first here. Met with gynecologists. First of all, that's the first thing you do. Is there anything like this? Is there any reason why this won't work? What do you think about it? What do your colleagues think? Blah, blah, blah. Talk. There's a saying, you talk to 100 doctors before you even begin to create what I'm proposing here. Prepare patent claims. So of the many claims that were claimed, the absolute first was it's the first surgical implant to block metastatic migration. There's nothing like that. It's the first implant to aid morphology assessments. We talked about the fiducial markers. And it was the first device to advance pain for diagnostic purposes. Women always present in pain. 80%, 70% of all cancers are diagnosed because the patient presented in pain. We're bringing that pain from metastatic progression stages to precancerous and early stage diagnosis. And I got to make up a name, prohelgiognosis, advancing pain for the purpose of diagnosis. I made up Oncophobia too, if anybody's into neologism. Okay, big block, right? Boom. The USPTO came back and said, hey, somebody's already thought of making a cloche for the ovary. And you look at it, and if you can read it, it's for contraception. And that's ridiculous. Who would have an operative procedure to encloche their, it's a ludicrous procedure. And it deals with fertility. It has nothing to do with cancer. And the bizarre thing is, Yoon, the inventor, is an absolute pioneer of surgical oncology. He is a giant. He's not Dr. Sim, but he's right there. His permanent collection is housed by the Smithsonian Institute. He had 235 patents. Of his 235 patents, guess how many did not mention cancer? Remember, he's an oncologist. The answer is 10, and of those 10 is that one. So you would think the USPTO would apologize for thinking that was blocking IP. And the case is that Yeah, there are over 1,500 patents for a pacemaker, but there are apparently only one ovary to be covered because pacemakers apply to men and women. Anyway, so on we go. Not defined yet. We have to define the market opportunity. It is a very large market, $3 billion just in the United States. Define regulatory pathway. It's clearly a class 3. It's a pre-market approval. That's the highest level of FDA oversight. This is a major project. Because it's a permanent implant, that's really the highest level of medical device attention. You really need to show safety and efficacy. As you can see there, it's probably $100 million development, and forget 3 years, 5 years of fully funded, ready to go. Of course, you don't have to raise $100 million at once. You raise based on milestones, but it would take dramatic finance. And then you have to build a team. And luckily, my team was developing a product to close the vaginal cuff. There are experts in biomaterials, biocompatible, and all of our vendors were world class themselves. At least that was ready to go. And then we had to recruit world class KOLs, or key opinion leaders, the advocates. These are the doctors, the giants in their field, who will take the dais at major colloquia and tell their colleagues how they're going to conduct surgery in the future. And then, I recruited world class. CEO of an NCI dedicated cancer center, became the head of my clinical advisory, foundational laparoscopist who led drcoop.com after he gave up gynecologic oncology. And it so influentially brought the Najad brothers from Iran. There's 3 Najad brothers. All of them have won whatever the highest award is for surgery. They're absolute superstars, all of them. And Steve Klasko to head Jefferson. He's a great guy. So we went to see the world's preeminent medical ethicist, who was at Penn and is now at NYU. The question was, hey, this is going to take 5 years to develop. Millions of women, or 1 million women, will suffer in the absence of this product being an option. So what do you say? We do the TED Talks, we get the word out, because curing ovarian cancer, as I said before, is nowhere near as dramatic an effect on the health of Americans as stopping elective bilateral oophorectomy, or at least fully informing patients as to what they are agreeing to. But he urged the product be developed. He had no faith that the standard of care could be changed in any way, shape, or form without the actual product. So there we go. So then you have to get funding. Obviously, it's too big for angel investors. Those are private investors. They invest $10,000, $20,000. NCI SBIR funding, it was too big a project. They tend to fund incremental. This is not an incremental technology. And the venture capitalists were very matter of fact. Obviously, I didn't go to enough of them, but when I heard again and again and again, why would we finance a product designed to remove legal liability from doctors and place it squarely on our own shoulders? So that was a no. So without funding, you can't advance, certainly in a project like this. But there was one hope. Philanthropic groups. So CFS, that's the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, they had just sold for $3 billion a product, a pharmaceutical product that they had invested $100 million in. So I had talked to other philanthropic organizations, and the fear of missing out, like they were very jealous of what the CFS had just done. And CFS has put that money to great use. They've not squandered their fortune. But in the ovarian cancer world, there just aren't enough survivors to create real momentum. They're teeny little organizations. OCRF, Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation, teal is like, instead of the red, pink, blue banner or the yellow banner, it's teal banner. Like they don't have anywhere near the funds necessary. But you know who does? The Komen Foundation. Komen Foundation could easily finance this project. So I met with the regional CEO of the Komen Foundation. And the idea was that she would recommend me to go to Dallas to talk to the head of the entire organization. We could talk about a finance plan. I'm talking, and she is getting dour and dour. And finally, it's like, what does this have to do with breast cancer? It's like, what? What do you mean? What does that? Like, this is your population. They're not just women, but the women with the genetic, like the BRCA1, BRCA2. I have to move this. PALB2, which honestly I'm not as familiar with. but breakthroughs in BRCA discovery. But you can see by the statistics, a woman who has BRCA has a very good chance of breast cancer, a very good chance of ovarian cancer. It's their exact cohort. It's the women they are pledged to assist, and to be dismissed like that as having nothing to do with breast cancer. I was dumbfounded. I was there with my friend who's the gynecologist, head of drcoop.com. He was as upset as was I, but she refused to pass a recommendation on to her office in. Anyway, we'll go. I was disappointed. And the Komen Foundation, I didn't know maybe I should race through this. The Komen Foundation puts most of their money not into research, very little, about 5% goes into true research. They do most of their money in scanning, so mammography. And you might think that's very effective. Isn't that great? We're spending all this money on mammography. Well, there's lots of articles showing slow progress, that there are many, it's considered low value care. Scandinavian countries don't do mammography. As a matter of fact, unindicated scanning is a bad idea because of false positives, false negatives. So they just don't do it. And there's no difference in death from breast cancer between Scandinavian countries and American countries. And they're trying to reduce the cascade events. Stop giving unindicated women without a problem, and men too. It works the same way for men. You just don't want to scan somebody who has no symptoms. Benefits of hormone screening. So there you go. Oncophobia is everywhere. But Susan B. Komen, Susan G. Komen. I don't want to rag too hard on. Maybe I do. But of course, their recommendation is that the scanning age drop to 40. So every year, starting at 40. That is decades of unindicated scanning. Can't even get ductal carcinoma. So at Wits End, I had no IP, no funding, no foundation, no. So I commiserated with Dr. Fisher, the gentleman that stopped radical mastectomy, and I'm not going to show his later, maybe I will. But luckily, the head of my clinical advisory introduced me to the fact that there was new research, very compelling research, that ovarian cancer did not start in the ovaries. The reason why it's a surface phenomenon is because it starts in the fallopian tubes and then spreads. So ovarian cancer is itself a metastatic cancer. And the gentleman who discovered that, and who will win the Nobel Prize, is Ronnie Drapkin. He's at Penn, and a wonderful guy, such a sweet, lovable guy. But Ron doesn't see this rapidly changing the standard of care either. But the evidence is building and building and building and building. And there's real momentum now. So it was time for me. I could not make the breakthrough in getting this project off the ground. The USPTO, the patent office, was refusing to give me a patent. You cannot do anything financially without a patent. Philanthropy, anyway, whatever. I think I might have taken too long telling you about this project. So I moved on to my next project, and just a little over a year ago, I got this in the mail. So, 6 years too late. But anyway, so now we're in the coda part, hopefully. So there's very good news in cancer. There's fabulous things. David Feigenbaum, you might have heard of him. He cured his own disease. He was on death's doorstep. He took a compound that was approved for another indication that had lost its patent. So there's no money in making this product. There's no money in testing this product. And he realized thousands and thousands and thousands of compounds like that are sitting on the shelf. And some doctors know to use them off-label, but so he's doing fabulous work. Of course, they're robots. Do you remember the picture of Yoon holding this giant thing with one hand, and what you can't see is he's operating with the other? Well, here we are. That was probably 40 years ago that picture was taken. And ta-da! What you don't even see here is the chair. He gets to sit in a chair outside the surgical field. He doesn't even have to scrub down. And he can put his knees up. They're even talking about getting a back rub in this thing. He puts his elbows on those extenders right there. And meanwhile, that is what is inside the surgical field, the sterile field, operating on the patient. So that's actually a good thing. AI, of course, is changing the way we fight cancer, from diagnosis to treatment indications. And of course, vaccines, cancer vaccines. Tremendous data on their efficacy, and we're branching out beyond just HPV. And the rise of the third world for years and years and years. A typical case was Medtronic bought a technology that was on the market for 10 years in Europe. They brought it back to America. This was for a heart denervation for high blood pressure. And the FDA made them go through their pre-clinicals. Again, they had to take a technology that's been in humans for 10 years and begin as if it was a novel technology and start with animals. And it took them years and years to enter the U.S. market. So those walls are breaking down, and this is a particular case of using lidocaine to surround the cancers before excision. Nobody knows why this works. It is tremendously effective. It's crazy effective. The follow-up was 40% increased survival from serious cancer procedures. And of course, we know Jennifer Doudna and her colleague, the name should be up there, Charpentier, CRISPR-9s were now able to modify the DNA itself. And they're oncoviruses, so they've identified viruses that attack only cancer tissue. And we'll do fringe procedure. Oh, this is immunology, right. So, wow. So this is a guy, same story. He noticed that his patients who got violently ill with a diagnosis of, I think it was breast cancer, but the ones who got violently ill and almost died from sepsis or whatever in the hospital, massive high temperatures, they survived. Like their cancer was gone. And the ones who didn't get violently ill with the same diagnosis, they all died. And so he tried to tell his colleagues, like, hey, like he surmised that the high fevers were driving the immune system to such a high level that it was able to penetrate whatever masking, whatever cloaking technology cancer uses to avoid the immune system. And they thought he was a nut. And here we are, 130 years later, and it is the foundation of checkpoint inhibitors, CAR T-cell, cancer vaccines. It's all back to this guy and his observation and him being ignored for generations. And newly recognized ingredients, that's an amanita mushroom, highly, don't screw with those, and at least you can harvest these, right? Any mushroom you see with a bright red or orange cap with dots, that's an amanita, so you can harvest that, whereas psilocybin looks like every mushroom I've ever seen, of course marijuana too. And there's other side diseases. So what I'm working on now is cachexia. Half the people that die during chemotherapy actually die from wasting disease. It's called cancer cachexia. It used to just be thought of as an inevitable symptom of cancer. And now we know it's its own disease. It can be treated independently. If people can live through chemotherapy, they can be cured. And there are instances of people who die during chemotherapy, and on autopsy, there is no cancer. Chemo was totally effective. But they did not survive their ordeal. And the ordeal was more than just the cancer. The semaglutide. Oh, here's an interesting thing. Semaglutide, GLP-1 inhibitor. It doesn't just stop. We know that cancer comes from something like 75 to 90% of all cancers are basically self-induced. It's cancer, alcohol abuse, lifestyles, and semaglutide is this. Is it the miracle drug everybody thinks? Are we going to regret it in 20 years? I don't know. But the behaviors that are changed could really dramatically influence the rise of cancer. So as I said earlier, cancer is a disease of the elderly. Obviously, there are long tail instances of much earlier, but it's a disease of the aged. And as you can see by this chart, cute little trivia question. Anybody know what that giant drop is there? It's a very powerful symbol to see the power of pathogens, disease, versus the power of war. World War II and World War I are just, I mean, you can see them on this chart, but what you're looking at there, of course, is the Spanish flu epidemic. It killed more than World War II and World War I put together. And that's the danger of RFK Jr. He ignores the powerful history of our ability to fight pathogens, and I have no idea why. But if you see the flat line from basically 1950 to 1970, that was what engendered the war on cancer. People were frustrated. Longevity's flatlined, cancer care is flatlined. We need to marshal our services, and you can see it made a big difference. If you want to not have cancer, the country with the lowest cancer rate in the world is, anybody? Afghanistan. Right, because they're all dead by 40. So if you don't want to die of cancer, die young. And then you can see, like, here is just a touch. You can see these diseases that we're really getting our hands on. As I said, 80% of all cancers are virtually self-induced. Heart disease the same way. COVID-19 accidents, and people are always going to be stupid, but yeah, you can see how giant chunks of these bars can be reduced. And so I'm going to sum this up. So women are brainwashed to have higher regard for men's reproductive organs than their own, and their own reproductive organs are what make them women. And even to go further, women are maimed, shunned, and killed all around the world because they did not treat a vestigial tissue mass with utmost respect. The hymen, their cherry, and yet they let the organs that define them as women just disappear as if nothing was happening. So the foundation was sort of save the cherries. Forget the cherry, save the cherries. But we'll see. We'll see. Now that I have the patent, I might actually change my mind on this. But I think I'm at the end, guys. So that is oncophobia. Die of cancer. Don't die because of the fear of cancer.